reading the challenge and seeing like, hey, how can we like link? How can we answer the number of these questions, which is already starting to prepare like the storyline for that specific track. That's something that we just have to start on while the developers are like working on the things that need to be developed, of course.
And on that, just one small remark, because R&D 7 specifically for the Nature 2.0 track?
They are, but I think you can adapt them a little bit. It's like just structure of like a framework to use, and I think we can do something similar for the 4 tracks. It doesn't need to be exactly the same, but like what is like the challenge, like how would you answer it, all these things, like just a little bit of.
It makes sense, but it's just I thought there was some confusion that these 7 points were applicable to all these tracks.
No, I know it's a Nature 2.0 thing, but it's just because that track is well organized, but we should.
Yeah, I agree.
We should use it. On that point, Abby, you wanted to say?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that one thing that I think that we should, and maybe this already happened, maybe I'm just disorganized with it, but I feel like there's a bunch of documents flying all over the place with Odyssey in Google Docs, in Odyssey Hack. And I think one person should take on the job of consolidating it into one shared folder and maybe in different mediums, just so we can all have access to it in regards to the greater narrative that we put together with the video, the storylines that we're putting together, the Excel sheets. And so I'm wondering, where is most of the documents located? Because I think that we want to be putting all of our product specs there. And that's where we should be, updating the general Odyssey hack group with team's progress and stuff. So I think that would be a really great step this week.
It's one of the topics we had at the design meeting, where also because it was also a subgroup, not everybody was informed, and also some people could not make it. There's like two answers to your question. One is we said from the beginning that this spreadsheet is like a central source of truth. Yeah. So it would be cool if all the documents were just, if somebody creates a new document, gets linked there, and we should probably make a better overview. And in order to help us with system building, like if you go to the document now.
Yeah. Which document are we talking about specifically?
Everything, the hackathon teams spreadsheet.
I'll share again, Jeff, but that one indeed has already most of the links. I was going to say the same thing.
Cool. Yeah, that's what I was under the assumption of, but I think that, we should just like organize it a little bit so we can just because I like organizing things. So I can take a shot at organizing it, or Kai, if you from the design group had some, feedback on how to organize it, you could do it for something. But that was just general feedback for moving forward since we're approaching the hackathon date and stuff.
Yeah, so one thing that should help us in modeling the overall system and facilitate like integration, we made like this, we started this full system real-time board, which is also linked in this hackathon. I made the font bigger so it kind of stands out.
Nice.
What is it called? The link. Oh yeah, that one. Okay.
I copied the link in Jitsi Meet as well, but you find it on the hackathon sheets. So it would be a good action item after this call to. So if you were starting a document and you don't see it in this list in the hackathon team, just add it.
Nice.
But that's not a tool that we have to sign up for, and it gives an overview of everything. Is that it?
That's like for user flows, it seems. Like that's kind of more so getting into if someone wants to see, from my understanding of what it looks like, kind of user flows for the actual product specs, right?
We can do everything. Like you can add a text field and then put a link in it. So
interesting.
With those real-time boards, it's really limitless. But right now we started with using it for user flows, so we could at least, there's some time we need to, or at one point we need to come all together with this. And I also saw that Team 4 is using a real-time board already, but they are like, this is crazy complicated. So I tried to model a new one where we could, we were modeling for each team the user flow they have, and then try to compile it into one.
Okay,
and
so
you can always add new content. Like if you feel you just best add a new frame here and make new content and call it something. Yes.
So that one is for the user flow. So the real-time board is for the user flows. When it comes for organization of documentation, so we link everything in the hackathon team's document, but indeed that one needs to be cleaned up a little bit because there is stuff that's outdated on there, and there's also some documents missing. I think, I don't know, Abby, if I have the same issue with it as you do. I also like some organization and structure, but we can create a Google Drive and like try to force everyone to put everything on there, but it's probably not going to work.
If we just make a new, so I will make a new column here, like after recordings, and probably like there should be notes and there should be working docs, and the resources are different.
I think
the resources are,
So I think we can just organize the Excel sheet. The reason why I say we need organizing is really to pull out what we're missing. And in regards to what we need logistically for the hackathon and what we need coordination wise for the hackathon. So really just any product specs so we can all make sure that we have all the puzzle pieces filled in, right? So let's just take Kai, Chris, and I will take a shot at organizing the hackathon sheet, and then we can just make sure that everything's there, and if we're missing anything, we'll know. But I think that we should just put some active effort into that. Cool.
Perfect.
So what comes next? What is most efficient for, I'm not sure, Chris, if you had an agenda that you wanted to stick to.
Yeah, here in the beginning, like first thing is an agenda proposal that I quickly made, and I'm putting some notes in there. So I was thinking just like, let's do a quick check-in of the teams of like how they're like working, storylines, the thing that we mentioned in the beginning, people who still need to sign up for accommodation, and then miscellaneous points, other things that people want to mention.
Cool. Yeah, so I think that the team check-ins is really great, right? Because I think that this is the point in time to float any questions that we still have about product specs and scope to the top now. Whether if that's just, I feel like this is a opportunity from any rep, from any team to float any questions that they have to, people in logistics, people managing the scope, all of that stuff. So we can start getting those answered for everybody, right? So I'll give the check-in for team one, if that's cool. I saw Seth on the line. So Seth, if you have any open questions, you can chime in there too. But for us, we're chatting after this call and trying to touch base with Billy, who's in South Africa right now. We're aligned in different groups, and we just need to kind of coordinate together and say, okay, what needs to get done before getting into the hackathon. From Billy, that's really just messing around with some of his bonding curve implementation stuff and just like getting it figured out, solving any hackathon bugs that we would run into before. And he said that he was already messing around with that. So Lorelei sent these couple questions that were for team, like what each team to answer. So I think that after this call, I'll be able to send those back to her, which is like the concept of the detailed timelines and the scopes and who's responsible for integration and stuff like that. The only thing that is top of mind for me is the design thing. I wasn't able to come to the last design call, but I'd love to get another one scheduled since our team is also going to be, designing a lot of that main interface. And so I think that's the key integration part to get aligned with the rest of the teams. So that would be like my action item coming out of this, is that we could figure out another time to chat about that. That's my feedback. Seth, do you have any questions that you want to bring up to the greater team right now that we, beyond what we're going to talk about in our separate team call today? I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Cool. I'm just doing this because I can't hear myself when. But I still have some serious concerns about sort of some of the assumptions that we're making. a big one is really that we're operating at abundance, right? And that in order to basically give anyone returns on investment, we have to have abundant funding. And I think that's like a really risky assumption. And I was wondering if anyone had any financial models on like what it would take for both the commons to be sustainable and the investors to get returns.
And on top of that too, I think that ties into the more technical question of this open phase of the bonding curve that's requiring contributors to donate money directly to the funding pool, which Seth, I think is the answer to your question, but also the user story around how much we need to raise and how that's calculated is something that I think we'd love feedback on and guidance on, because I think that that's like key. So I'm wondering if anybody from the TEC team, you know, maybe has thought about that too, or if anybody has any initial thoughts on that right now.
Yeah, so I guess, and this is mostly coming from Nature 2.0, from our narrative coming out of Jan Peter. So I think that using that assumption that we are in abundance and we do not have to worry about that kind of funding is, in terms of like on the technical side, very naive. I think it's, I mean, not saying that Jan Peter is naive. That is the narrative that they're working off of, and that can be our narrative overall for these projects. But ultimately, that question is the key question that all of these projects are trying to solve. How do you get sustainable funding for a commons effort? That's what we're working to build. Technically, that is the biggest problem we are looking to solve. But I don't think for the Nature 2.0 track especially, and I mean, maybe for our overall narrative of this hackathon, these people are looking for big ideas and they're already assuming we're through the looking glass. So in an economy of abundance, how does this system operate? Okay, we can sell people on that, but ultimately what we are building is getting through the looking glass. How do we get sustainable funding, if it exists, for a commons effort to fund socially beneficial activity? That's the key question that I don't think anybody has solved. We have a lot of ideas how to do it, especially Zargam and Block Science have lots of ideas on how we can move forward on this. I don't think we're abstracting away that problem in our implementation. Perhaps we are just skimming over that in the narrative, especially for Nature 2.0. Because that's where they really want to focus, is in this new economy of abundance. How does our system work?
Well, I think that it could be beneficial for, and Seth, maybe we just talk about this in our call, is to at least model out, do a financial model of like what would be necessary. It doesn't mean that you need the solution for how much money needs to be directly donated or contributed to a commons effort to initialize a successful curve, right? You know, when it enters the hatching phase, but I guess like maybe developing a financial model for that would be something that could be beneficial, because at least it puts it in a scope instead of saying that we're just going to wave a hand over it. And so, I mean, I don't have extreme expertise in that, but I'm sure that we can like figure something out. That's just my open.
Maybe some small feedback of when we did the video a few days ago. So after we finished the large call, I had some chat with GP, and then we were specifically talking about the Nature 2.0 track, and we sort of, I think, figured out that there was a way to assume like some system of abundance in the part that we are going to try in Nature in Team 2, basically. So we're going to do that. What's it called now? The momentum vote. Okay. So in that,
you broke up. I can't hear you.
You're losing your. Yeah. Now you're back.
Yeah.
You're back. Okay. We're losing you.
Try again. Maybe I have too much sunlight here. I'll go back. My Wi-Fi might be better there. Is this better?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. Clearly the sunlight. Yeah, so it might be possible to assume like a system of abundance when we create this an implementation of like a preference voting. So it doesn't necessarily have to come. So the assumption could be that we say, okay, there's something that comes comes before the conviction voting or the momentum voting, and something that goes out of it being like the conclusion of whatever comes out of the conviction voting. And so it doesn't really matter, I think, if it's what kind of system is before that. And like, since GP specifically wants to have something that thinks about, like, as he called give it 3.0, like something that doesn't imply an economic system, you could assume that there's something else coming in. So it's just like a quorum of voting power that you have that you can apply in that momentum voting. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be the output of whatever goes in or out of that bonding curve, I think. So it might be an option, I think, to just assume for the Nature 2.0 track that there we just model a system that could also be applied to a system of abundance, but also could work in the overall system that we are envisioning. So that wouldn't exclude one or the other. So you could create like the whole token bonding system, like with not like acting in a system of scarcity in team 1, but still assume that you have a system of abundance to do the voting in team 2, I think. So what do you guys think?
Hi, this is Corey here from team 1, and I think part of that contention stems from the fact that it's not really clear how any of these projects are going to be revenue generating, or if like that is factored into the model. And I think that being a requirement, whether or not it generates revenue, and whether or not you know, the tokens themselves are securities that like pay. One, is it a security, or one, is it something that like actually pays out a dividend? I think is what's the most confusing. And so like something like continuous organizations that like Theobald is working on, you know, he uses a bonding curve in his model, but it makes a lot of sense maybe in this use case because you know, this is a for-profit organization that is, you know, trying to pay for units of work, is getting revenue from an outside source, is minting tokens to claim that work. But in the commons use case, I think it's not very clear, you know, how that organization makes money. It just sort of it does a lot of burning of tokens. And it closes a loop in a way that you know, really doesn't. I mean, to me, doesn't. It's not clear to me how the liquidity in the secondary market arises for people that want to actually earn money for the work that they've done. You know, like I know there was this idea of the TCR. So if there was like maybe some clarity on how that provides liquidity for these tokens, I think that would alleviate a lot of the skepticism that we have about the implementation.
So the question was, how do people get paid for work within the commons using the TCR mechanism, or the?
I guess like how they get paid. So there's two questions. One, you know, how do we determine whether, like, is it a requirement that the organization is revenue generating? That's my first question. And then the second question is, how do we ensure that there's liquidity in a secondary market for these tokens, and so that people can actually, you know, get paid and feed themselves for the work that they're doing? And then how do you, and then what is the curation mechanism for that secondary market? Is it a token registry? You know, is it like what is the exchange? Like, how are we setting up that? How are we answering that question?
Gotcha. So I don't think we should start with the assumption that these are revenue generating. It really depends on the use of the commons. So for example, like, let's use the very first commons we are looking to build is the token engineering commons. We are looking for community participants to invest and be able to fund communal research into token engineering practice that will pay researchers to contribute labor. That labor will be measured by Team 5's measurement system, which basically counts. I mean, at this point, it's looking at a GitHub account and saying, okay, this many commits, this many likes, this many upvotes. Okay, this person did X amount of labor. So in a payout period, there is the communal pool of funds is apportioned. So it says, okay, 20% of the pool of funds is now apportioned to be allocated. And then that apportionment is allocated according to the work that was done. That X DAI goes back into the curve, so it's a buyback. So all the X DAI that is allocated to paying workers is put back into the curve. So that is a bonus for everybody holding the tokens. So now everyone is paid in tech tokens, and they can either sell that to the bonding curve or they can sell that on a secondary market. So if they sell it to the bonding curve, there is a small transaction fee, a 2% exit friction, which then feeds the pool of resources that can pay for more work. There will be secondary markets. I don't think we have any plans on controlling those secondary markets. I'm not sure we can, but that would be if someone says, okay, well, on the secondary market, the token is going for a higher price, I'm going to sell it on the secondary market versus to the bonding curve. So they can go to an exchange and set up, a trade if there is liquidity. If there isn't liquidity, they can always sell to the bonding curve. So this is the useful part of that, is you have liquidity at all times through the bonding curve. There will be probably some forces keeping the secondary market price close to the bonding curve price, because there is always that arbitrage opportunity. So we've argument gone up.
I don't mean to interrupt, but wouldn't that be like very violent, like the variation, like now that the curve is sort of at any time step probably has to be responsible for the main point of like liquidation. So you're kind of incentivized now to like always interact with the curve and to like constantly be buying in and selling and sort of like waiting, and sort of like, I know that was like, so obviously the motivation of batch bonding curves is to like mitigate the front running aspect of this, but you can still like, I guess like obviously a secondary market could arise, but if it's not revenue generating, I don't see why one would, why would anyone want to buy these tokens on the secondary market when they can just go to the curve, as like that is probably going to be the primary mechanism to supply liquidity. And if that's the case, then in order to arbitrage, then selling, is going to be burning the tokens is going to be another primary, is the primary driver of that liquidity. So like the variance of that, of the curve is going to be very high, and it's going to be like very fast, right? Like it's going to be madness basically. And so like what controls are there to ensure that like, the system can sustain shock, or that, that the risk profile basically is like minimized for the actors, or like prevent a situation where like, everybody holds and holds and holds. It's kind of like FOMO 3D. And then, then like a whale decides to start dumping, right? And then now everybody has to kind of like react to that situation in order to sustain themselves. So I guess these are some of the questions that I was wondering if there are just like any other teams that are like focused on solving these problems.
So that'll be team 1 is working on the bonding curve. So first off, volatility, I think we should expect it and we should plan for it. And the way our curve works is it feeds off of volatility. So if you have speculators buying and selling, the curve basically says, yes, you can sell, yes, you can take a profit, but we are going to take a small part of that profit, and we're going to feed it back into the commons pool. So if everybody, so this also prevents kind of a race to the bottom. So if there's a whale that's coming in and buying a bunch of tokens and then selling a bunch of tokens, I mean, yes, the curve, hopefully we have a wide window of it's not going to be like an up down. It might be a more, you know, our active area of the curve, and this is not necessarily exactly how it's going to be. I'm just speaking kind of in generalities. If we have sort of a, you know, a low slope area and it moves up and down that slope, that's okay. It's not going like 0 to 100. It's maybe going, you know, 40 to 50 cents, 60 cents, who knows. But that volatility is also feeding the resource pool of the curve. So if everyone buys and holds, we actually want to encourage people to sell a little bit to pay their rent, to buy food, or to make a profit, depending if they're participants in the community or speculators coming here to make a profit. The system feeds off of that volatility. Also, it also prevents a bank run. So if a whale comes in and buys a bunch of tokens, sells a bunch of tokens, and everybody goes, oh man, we got to get out now because this price is dropping, everybody sells. The price of the token goes to 0, but then this pool of community resources has a whole bunch of XDAI in it to spend on the community. So these tokens have an innate value just based on the resources that they can allocate. So if it goes down to extremely low, now the value of the token that you're holding to govern those funds has a value just by the fact that it can attribute these funds once everybody exits the curve.
I think that just one thing, I think that we should pin these questions, Seth and Corey, and continue them in our own call. And we might hop off in 15 minutes just to do this, just so we can get the other team's progress. But from what I'm hearing, Corey, is that there's like two things that we should focus on. And this is really questions for Billy, which is where his batch bonding comes in to help manage the volatility within the actual curve. The second one, Corey, is how are we modeling the assumption that we have an abundance of funding that would, you know, make this curve initially have enough utility to actually make the curve valuable and initialize it successfully. And then the third is that, and this is, I think, the question that we should ask the greater group to help answer, is how in these other situations, probably in team 3, who is managing the actual allocation of the capital, right? And how that rebonds into the curve and what that looks like, right? How can we ensure that we're also managing for volatility within the system of how the capital is being allocated? And I think that that's also in accordance with how we're modeling the vesting policy and how tokens are unlocked for use and for allocation. And because right now we're just saying that it's based off of the state variables of the system, right? And we're saying that it's based off of how much money is in the pool and how much money is in the reserve and how many tokens are floating and in supply. And I think that we need to, I feel like from what you were saying, that's something that we need to figure out with the rest of the teams too. And then how that vesting policy is going to be modeled. But I wanted to pin it because I want to make sure, since we're already halfway through, that the other teams had their chance to talk. And then we'll continue this in 15 minutes. Does that sound good? Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for answering the questions. And to sort of like really quick, just like kind of like repackage what Jeff was saying. So like so I guess the understanding is that like having these like minimum requirement for the funding goals is the way that you ensure that just the basic operation of the organization can continue, right? Like this 20% pool, this 15% pool of XDAI is sort of the insurance backed, like it's insurance that like, you know, at least people can claim work within that organization, right? So yeah, that definitely answers like a good, definitely good part of my question. So thank you. Cool. Awesome.
The idea that there are some portion of funds that can never be extracted is also a fundamental risk to investors, right? Because if shit goes wrong, if people aren't doing their jobs, right? If it's just a bad project or something else happens, there's nothing you can do about it, right?
Well, that's the other question that I got asked during the token engineering meetup that I did, was like, what's the off switch? Which is something we've talked about a lot. And it's something that we need to think about and have a general conversation about. The off switch for this entire stack, if the project goes wrong, is something, what's locked up, what's not locked up, who has that control. And that's something that we should talk about. And I think that potentially that's a conversation for Griff and Zargam to be in, of what is that off switch and how does that relate to what's locked and what's unlocked, and how does that affect the risk for the investors or the contributors of the commons. But I know that that's something that's not clearly answered yet. And so we should probably just, you know, pose that question to Griff and Zargam and say, you guys have talked about this. What's the solution that we're proposing, or what are the assumptions that we're testing within that?
Yeah, there will be some centralized kill switch security measures. Griff has a pretty good mind on those already. I've heard him talk about them. I don't believe we have them fleshed out, but he does have a few kind of backstop.
I think that that's going to be the thing to flesh out, because I think that if we're getting any Q&As to any of these projects, after seeing people's reaction to me just in general talking about it, that's the thing that people are going to ask. And so we should not have a solution per se. I think we should have an assumption for how we want to test that, right? Instead of stating this is going to be the off switch, because the off switch is what triggers people. No pun intended.
And that's one other thing, as you mentioned, you know, investor confidence in the system. So the way the apportionment will work is that it kind of guarantees a half-life or some you know, period of time over which these apportionments can happen. So it's saying, rather than saying to investors, there's a portion that will never be released, it's saying to investors, this is a project that has a long-term roadmap, and the funds that are in the DAO will last at least, you know, I'm not sure what the half-life on our apportionment amount is, but I remember talking with Zargam, and you know, we were looking at like in the 5-year range, that there is at least a 5-year runway of funding for this project with the funds that are allocated. So it's more so ensuring that there is a half-life to the funds that are available, rather than saying, oh, all of them could go on the next project, and then investors are like, well, now we have no money left to do anything in here. So yeah, that's definitely a consideration that is on the table, and will be fleshed out more soon.
Another little note is probably that I don't think we're going to mention investors in any way in the entire story.
Yeah, that actually is a true reframe on the wording, that it's really non-investors. Yeah,
it's like people who give, they're donors or they're givers. Like,
well, there are also people who are contributing to the labor and who are actually doing the work. And so I think that that's why we should be calling them members, because they're, yes, contributing, but they aren't investing. Investing aligns these individuals with only a profit incentive, because that's what investors are defined by. So I think that, yes, there is a financial constraint that is eliminated through the use of this system. But that just means that it's a cooperative member, right? They're covering their expenses with the revenue that's being flowed within this system. So I think that's a key thing too.
So
sorry to interrupt.
So yeah, I thought that was the, you know, sort of the core promise, right? Like the core value prop of the system is that you can invest, right? And yeah, I mean, it's not just
you can speculate.
It's like double bottom line, right? I mean, it's like impact investors do this all the time. They have, you know, bottom line profit and bottom line social impact. But
I don't think
I was originally attracted.
No. The core value prop is for sure that you can like contribute to the project, and there might be and there will be speculation and so on, but we're not promising any profit, because that's important. That angle is that angle.
So what's the point of the whole system generally?
To fund people's labor, to cover the expenses of people's labor that they are contributing back to the commons. So to fund
why do we
open
do
source
for returns, right? Like, why do we try to give investors any returns?
It's really just a reframe of returns in this. And I think that this is something that I think in the communication of this has gotten misaligned a little bit. The returns of the system are covering expenses, not the core value prop of the returns are to cover expenses for work done, not to make profit off of holding a token. It's not a speculative thing. It's the system, and we keep talking about speculation. The system serves speculators because it enables speculation, not to harm the system. But I think the key thing is that it's covering expenses, not making profit.
And the thing is, like, if the purpose is that, why are we charging the people who are actually covering their expenses and, you know, labor friction, right? Like, we're just deprioritizing the actual people who are on the ground working on these projects. It just feels like there's a fundamental disconnect between the people we're trying to solve problems for and the solution, right? Like it seems like
I think it's just it's a reframe of how you're approaching
there's a lack of empathy for the end users in this entire project generally. Yeah.
So maybe a proposal.
Receiving the money as people who just receive donation, but it's really that this is, again, members. This is members of a cooperative. Think of how a cooperative works. People pay money and they pay fees to be part of a cooperative and receive things in return. It's a give and take. It's not just a give. And so that is what we're proposing, is a solution to approaching the commons, because we've seen that just giving leads to an privatization of shared resources, and just giving doesn't work anymore. So I don't think there's a lack of empathy. I think that there's just a reframe in how we're approaching the behavior of what this system represents. And I think that that's something that we should more clearly communicate, but I think we should also all align around, is that the mission isn't, again, to make profits for doing good. The mission is to restructure the way that we form cooperatives around shared resources.
Yep.
And maybe, I wonder if maybe there's a better way to do that. Like, we haven't tried just doing this without abundance. Like, we haven't really put effort into, like, what would the question of what would a commons look like if it were decentralized and it could achieve all the things that we were trying to do.
I think that this is a solution that people who were asking this question came up with. And so now we're trying to build implementations within that solution spec. So I don't know if this is the best use of our time to be going and questioning the overall idea. I think we should be, but I think that we should also be focusing on, does this solution work? And more so working within our product spec assumptions of, this is the system that we're kind of all agreeing on trying to test and implement. And go forward from there. So I don't think that we shouldn't be questioning. I'm just wondering how much we should be more so just making assumptions and testing, you know?
Yeah, what we could maybe possibly do is, like, because indeed the idea of this call was just to do a quick team check-in. The next point after the team check-in is working on the story, the overall story, and the separated stories. So what we could do is, once we get there, that we do a call and that we ask everyone's feedback on the overall storyline, if it makes sense, and then that we then line up all the critical questions that people have, and that we try to break that, because these questions are really important.
Yeah,
but
totally.
they're probably the thing of the group is indeed the idea is that we build this and that we start from the question that we had, the answer that we're providing, we build this, and but how we the angle from which we're coming and so on, that's something that we need critical feedback on still. But that's probably another call.
Yeah, I think that that's a good, again, pin, because I think that we need to give the other teams the ability to surface any questions that they have as well. But that's something that will be key going into this. And we need to make sure we're all aligned on that narrative going into it. And that just means better communicating from the people who have started developing the narrative. And so we should do that, and we will. Cool.
I would suggest that to think of the curve as a two-way peg is the easiest way to think about it. You don't necessarily need to think of it as a financial thing. It could be any kind of contribution to another form, and that's what it is. It's like a electronics transformer. It's literally a power converter.
A load balancer.
That too, yes.
Okay. Okay, yeah, cool. So that's good. I think that was really good, and we will get all those questions answered. Does we want to continue on with the other teams?
Mm-hmm. So next is team 2. So maybe who could give an update for team 2?
Kai is there, maybe.
Kai, are you still there?
I am. I was just a few tabs away. So update for team 2. We're still fooling around with this thing we made at ETH Paris. We connected some stuff, so we're now able to mint tokens and stake them on our local chain. Just like a small update there. I made a UI for it that's not implemented yet, which I can show you. Maybe. So you see one of the UIs, but I really like this thing that Abby said before. I would like to see what people come up with for the for other tracks. Damn it! Where do I go to overview here? Well, never mind. As you know, we had this big call with Jan Peter, which is maybe the main update. Many of you were there. I see there is a slight discrepancy now between what we're actually building and what will be asked of us, really in basic properties in Nature 2. But I think, I mean, I suggested before, and we'll see how it turns out. I suggested we keep on building this whole system and maybe reflect what Nature 2 really does on the narrative around it. Yeah, and that still needs a lot of work from our side, but so we just changed from conviction voting to momentum voting, which is also like maybe a big update for you. Sorry, what?
That actually makes it clearer in my head, having seen your diagram, what it is.
Yeah.
I was too late to suggest inertia voting, but I don't know if that makes sense at all.
I was thinking that as well, but I felt like inertia had kind of a negative connotation.
The property we're actually using is inertia. It's like the word for if friction is applied, right, to an object or something. Yeah. So.
Okay? And how is the spec document going for Team 2?
So we had a good. Let me actually see. I haven't checked it yesterday. And I was also in the middle here of trying to order some of the documents. There it is. Yeah, so we should maybe have like a finishing session for this document, because this is like really the state it was before the call. And I mean, just scrolling through it, I see all the thing about the Mexican forest comments, for example. So very interesting thing is, do we change that? Do we change to a more general narrative for Team 2? But we haven't had after the call, we did not have a consolidation meeting yet.
But yeah, but that's the narrative. So the narrative, we're probably going to need to like. We still have to work on these 7 points. It's a narrative, but like the spec doc.
That's a good point.
The spec doc of like what you're actually building. This is that I know that there needed to be still work done on that, or is that like over? Is that done?
So we take a first shot here, and we modeled a user flow in the real-time board that people can look at. It's largely taken from what we did in Paris, but it's basically there. So now what I really would like to do is get this thing that we did in Paris finished. So we have a really working momentum voting application that is able to get issues from a GitHub repository and as an unordered list, and then let people use their own tokens to just stake them on there and have momentum voting be applied, and momentum builds in our new lingo until a threshold is met. And there has been discussions about the mathematical side of it. I'm not part of this math channel, so I'm not the best to give an update here. And I'm not sure if anybody here is part of that. Please speak up. But I know that they are talking about the trigger function over there, which is probably the most important piece of math that's still missing. And in general, I think we had a good progress on the side that's concerning the hackathon and really the narrative part, because we essentially got invalidated. So now we need to consolidate and come up with better things. And I hope to get Team 2 in a more motivated state to come together more frequently and work on it. Any questions?
When should the next meeting be?
Well, I don't know. There's nobody here from Team 2, right?
Okay.
One thing for the agenda that I want to add is maybe please everybody make sure that they are registered with Odyssey themselves. Like we team captains, we're pretty sure, and I'm pretty sure that at least Sultan from my team is missing. So we should contact. That's maybe one thing for you, Josh. It would be cool to contact. I don't know, Anna or Abe. Abe, about can we have like a full list of people that are registered from their side so nobody slips through the holes, because I'm pretty sure not 100% of people that are believing that they are joining now are actually registered on their side.
That is actually a really good point. Maybe Josh, honestly, I don't mind doing that either, because I was going to contact Anna for to change names and have it changed on the site as well, because we're not on there as giveth right now. But some names on the site are correct, others are not, and we changed anyways. So I don't mind asking her also.
Cool. If you're not for that, yeah, do it. I don't want to get into the names again.
I like doing that, so I don't mind at all. Okay, I added it to the logistics. Perfect. Thanks, Kai.
Just as long as it all gets cascaded, I'm fine.
And as a last thing, I found my Figma. So yeah, it's not so special, but this is how it looks. It's kind of like, here are some issues, and there was some proposed funding. That is the conviction that has now been built. Like, one has been folded out, which is the conviction for the second one, which actually got like not completed because people removed all their stake tokens. Yeah, just a little
nice
update.
Nice. Yeah, it looks good.
Cool. Can we do a quick check-in for Team 3?
Oh, just briefly. Sorry, I just wanted to mention that regarding the narrative for the Nature 2.0 track, is it Kai? Yeah. If you feel a bit stuck on it, you could consider talking to Roberto or myself, because we were in Jan Peter's track at the same hackathon last year and might have some learnings about how to approach it. But
that sounds awesome. Yeah. I'm going to make a doodle for a team meeting, so it's not only me who hears you guys. But yeah, I'm going to tag it. I'm going to put it in the main channel, and it would be nice to hear that.
Cool. Okay. Any team dates?
Yeah, I think I'm the only one from Team 3. And so we have made the spec. It's not much, but it's basically the scope, and we also modeled it in the real-time board, so we have like a user flow. And I think Josh looked it through and said that it was okay.
Yeah.
It
looked about right to me. I don't necessarily know, so it's good if other people check, but it looked about right to me.
Okay. And yeah, one thing we are missing is like, people from Team 3 meeting up. So that's our problem right now, I think, to really come together and talk together.
So currently your team captain is Griff, right?
Yeah, or maybe Max.
Okay. Yeah, so indeed, like maybe just push both of them or one of them to like get you guys together indeed, because we just need to have force each other to like talk and get it done and figure out next steps so that we have something before the hackathon starts, of course.
Yeah, I'd suggest that Team 3 is potentially dependent upon Team 2 stuff. So the more visibility on Team 2 stuff, the easier it will be for Team 3.
Yeah.
This diagram in the real-time boards looks pretty good to me, Deem. It looks like, and also I've heard from Griff that he has been working on the trigger function with Dargum, so there may be some more stuff to come on the next update. I'm not sure how much of that he's already conveyed, but I know he's been working on it quite a bit. So there should be some updates coming the next time you talk.
Okay.
Jeff, sorry, I missed that. Griff is working on what with Sargon?
On the math of the trigger function. The last time I talked to Griff, he was saying he's still working on that. So as far as the math that nobody's quite sure of, I believe they are still working on it.
Cool. Okay.
But is that more for Team 2? Because I think Team 3 is just interfacing with other teams, like, for example, the momentum voting.
Team 2 is the momentum voting. Team 3 is trigger function. Is that correct?
I believe it was the intended story. The trigger function is still largely undiscussed, though, so I wouldn't be surprised if the team has little clue about what it is, because I don't really know, and I've been watching all the videos.
Yes, Team 3, I see. Morpheus proposed dungeon.
Yep.
Yeah, but we had in the last meeting, I noted in bullet points what the scope of the different teams. I don't have it open here, but is it in the hackathon teams? Does anyone know? There's a link somewhere to the previous notes. That's why we need to clean up that doc.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know which is the team scope.
Do you know where that document is? Oh, note from March 14th. All hands call. It's in that one. I'm gonna share it here in the chat as well, because while we're here, we can just as well check, of course. Okay, so Team 3.
Oh, this one.
Scope: forming the list of milestones, adding and taking of the list, the staking and the taking away, and enabling receiving of the funds. That is what the scope is of Team 3.
So that sounds like it will just interface with Team 2, who will create the momentum, and then when the momentum gets reached, the trigger function gets crossed, and then interface with Team 3.
Yeah. So actually, I think we need to. So what Kai showed us, the interface for the conviction voting, I think that's what Team 3 should do, right?
The interface for Team 2 and Team 3, they will likely be working on a similar interface, if not the same one.
Yeah. Okay.
But the trigger function and so on is indeed more in Team 2 now than in Team 3. That's correct. Okay. Because we're running a little bit out of time and we don't want to run too long. Team 4, maybe a quick update.
Yes. So last week we met with the track sponsor and also with the team. We are defining, we have defined a document where we have a synopsis of our idea, and also the real-time board which we're using to bounce ideas at and discuss with the team what the whole big picture looks like. So it's taking shape, but it's also taking. We are actually coming out with a list of requirements, and what we realize is that we basically have what we call a resource ecology, where we have that every say product has its own basic resources, and all of that will be part of a big matrix. And then we will need to use some Gaussian elimination, for instance, to actually come to a solution to find out what the pricing of building stuff is. And of course, that is not possible to do in Ethereum at this stage. So we would need to do it externally, or is there somebody that can help? Well, it's pretty crazy actually to think that we would be able to do it directly on Ethereum, but we could even just give it a shot. Otherwise, we will have to do it externally and then basically get the number back into this big table of resources where, then there are all this problem of like, do we trust the Oracle and so on. So it makes it a little bit less strong as an argumentation. What also, as sum up is that we will need that every DAO, so the other teams will actually need to mint a non-fungible token as an output of the purpose of the DAO. So to make it more explicit, is like if the DAO has the purpose of producing something or doing something, that should be somehow encapsulated and represented by a non-fungible token, so that we're going to be able to attach all the contribution to that token. Yeah, that I don't know. So like if this is going to be well, possible, or if it's a bit of a distraction, but for us, it's yeah, that will be part of the integration with the other teams.
So do you mean that are you saying, because I'm not the technical guy, I'm just trying to take notes, but do you say that like the team that you would like, team 1, 2, and 3, to actually have all separately a token, so that you can, for your translation into value? Is that what you're saying?
As long as we have one way from one of the teams that are going to be to represent their output into minting a token for the output of the DAO, then we can just take that and use it into the exchange. So if at some point we integrate, then of course then all the other team will have the same token, right? Yeah. So, but we don't need 3 different tokens for the different teams. Just like a way, is like a saving information. Basically, we need to save this information on the chain so that we'll be able to trace it back.
Yeah, and I think we'll have that, because that's what currently is in the user story that Abby has written, which is the I don't know if it was the CBD token, but an Munis del Bosque or something like that token. So there is already like an idea of a token that we would be using.
That's not specific to NFT though, Chris. Maybe Jeff would be better to comment on that, as he's probably seen the design more. I would imagine the meta pool of tokens generated by the bonding curve could be somehow linked to an NFT, as in the NFT encapsulates all these. I don't know how it suits Roberto and Jeff though, so they're probably best discussing.
So Roberto, maybe, and I'll bring this up quickly, and maybe this answers the question, but like sort of we're looking for a way to measure labor so that it can be sort of like allocated into a funding matrix. So, you know, how much time someone's put in versus how much resources versus how much. So I guess that's mostly related to Team 5. Team 5 is the measurement system. So we will have, I mean, at this point, I don't believe it was going to be tokenized. It's sort of just a score. Although that could be an NFT score that is like redeeming time for value. Is that kind of what you're looking for?
Well, for us, the important is that we preserve the information of the contribution that made that happen.
Right. So that's Team 5.
That's Team 5. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, but we don't have team meetings with them at this stage, right?
We don't at this stage. They're a bit late to the game. I think. Well, we can. Yeah, I'm hoping that they will be in the loop a little bit more now that they have their team finalized. I believe they just got finalized, and they're just figuring out logistics to get the team there and the boat and everything like that. But as far as I understand, they will be producing some kind of like labor score that will attribute work done in the system, because ultimately that's an important aspect of the system, is who did what and how much was that valued and how much impact did that have. And they're hoping to produce basically a score for labor contributions of how much work was done and how much value should be received for that work.
Oh, that sounds exactly what we need.
Yeah.
You know what
exactly
they're in?
Ecology.
What track they're in? I have the doc open here. Let me see if we have it in.
The track that Team 5 is in, Nature 2.0.
They're in, oh, yeah, right. They're also in Nature. So we have 2 teams in Nature.
Mm-hmm.
And that was on JP's insistence. He really wanted a team led by Zargam, and that's another important aspect of the system. So good to have them on board.
Chris, sorry to interrupt.
No problem.
I have an update. I forgot that we actually have a meeting, Team 3 tomorrow, so you can just.
Oh, cool. I'll add it there.
Yeah, add that.
Yeah, a question actually for everyone, and I'll add it also in the logistics, but like the thing that Roberto also just mentioned, like if you have documents, because you said that you have that you met with the team and that you have the specs and the flow worked out now, if you could please add all of that in the hackathon teams somewhere, like something like Team 4, this is user flow, Team 4, this is the spec sheet, that we have all the documents in one place. And so Abby and Kai and I, we're going to work on organizing that sheet a little bit so that we actually can group and find back all information easily, because we're getting a whole lot of information that's like spread all out everywhere.
If we can minimize our entry to the one sheet that we started, it would be amazing. At least linked.
Yeah, I'll put the link again. So the last link that I now pasted is linked to the hackathon teams, and at the bottom you have like a number of resources, and if you just like describe in one sentence or something like what it is, then we'll get it like structured per team so that we can find all the information. Okay, cool. Then so we'll skip Team 5 for now because I don't think anyone from Team 5 is on the call. Nope. Okay. So then the next point that we had on the agenda was just like storylines. So I already took some notes here. So Jeff and Abby are working on the overall user story and the narrative. So I already gave some feedback there, but like Jeff, if you're like at some point, like if you worked on this more and you want feedback or Abby wants feedback, just like ping us that we can give, that we can continue working on this, because the overall narrative is probably going to be like, when you like present after like you hacked away during the hackathon and also before, the overall narrative is something that we all have to agree on, and it's going to be like the introduction, like, hey, this is the bigger thing we're building, and now we're going to like dive in to the specific challenge of this team. So it's important that that one makes sense for all the teams and that it's like very much aligned. And we also, at the same time, we need to really start working now on the track-focused challenges. And if possible, also integrate that more in the overall story. So Kai, you said you were gonna like schedule a call, but you're welcome to do that, of course. But what I propose is that maybe I have some things first to finish for Giveth, but I don't mind like trying to start like a document, putting the 7 questions there and starting to draft some answers. And it would be good that like that it just well, if someone else starts before, that's fine too, but that we just try to fill out these questions, that we get some feedback from JP once after we like agreed that story makes sense, and that we then do something similar for the other, that we help out like the storytelling people, also help out the other teams, because this is already preparation for the pitch actually.
Yeah, I mean, 2 things, like you are not part of any team anyway, right? So please go ahead. I'd already started a doodle I actually posted it already on Telegram for the meeting, and it's not only about the narrative. This meeting should be, yeah, we have a lot of devs in our team, and I would like them to talk about the system we're building as well. So it's the narrative is one part, and it's greatly appreciated if you
sure
can also help with work with you on those 7 questions. But it's a good form of preparation. I don't think we really want to go too deep into narrative anyhow, because I think this is one of the big parts that we actually do at Odyssey itself as well. So we build up, but over there it will all change again. So be prepared for that. I think but we will hear more from Roberto hopefully at the call how it generally plays out. Yeah, I have it now set for the doodle for Monday, Tuesday. So I hope we can have a meeting there.
Cool. Then what else? So yeah, logistics. Just a reminder, it's also in the team document for the people who are on the call. If you are not if you haven't put yourself on if you don't have lodging yet, please add yourself to our infamous boat overview so that we can have a place for you to stay. Another point is so we mentioned it in between. So make sure that when you go to that you are registered for Odyssey itself. If you're not registered with the correct name of your team, so the correct name of your team is in the hackathon team document again. So make sure that you are registered. If you are not, please let us know. Lorelei also asked some questions per team in every team chat. So make sure that if you're a team captain that you answer these questions. Any other logistics or other points that people have? No? Okay, and so as said, we're also gonna organize the documentation a little bit, make sure that everyone, because we need to collaborate, and the information is starting to pile up. So we're gonna try to organize, just like if you just remember the hackathon themes document, you should be able to find everything there. So if you have links, if you have documents, just put them in there at the bottom with a clear description what it is so that we can give it a clear place. So please, 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 whatever document you create, for example, this one, I'm gonna paste it in there immediately. So let's keep it all let's try to get ourselves organized because the date is getting closer. Okay.
I have one thing.
Yeah,
I would suggest Jeff to catch up with Roberto and Brian, if possible, just to check out their scope doc and learn more about the larger system envisioned, as it's largely pertinent, I feel, to all teams. It's a good design, so take a look at it.
Cool. Team for Trello board?
Well, catch up with, I would suggest literally having a sync. If you're dealing with token engineering stuff with Griff, I suggest getting the token engineers in one room.
Cool. Sounds good.
But they'll share with you after.
Okay, and so then to finish it up, I was just going to say, I sent a meeting request to people. It's a recurring one. For the moment, it's at 3 p.m. CET, but if for some reason we need to reschedule because now Griff couldn't make it, apparently, we can be flexible, but there is a reminder in your agenda that we do a weekly meeting if possible. Just get everyone together and link everyone to everyone, like Josh, for example.
That's the calendar invite, is it, Chris?
Sorry?
That's the calendar invite that was sent out, yeah?
Yep.
Okay, can we make sure that we have a minute this time, please?
Is it not the comments that is in there?
No, it was Odyssey Hack. That's how of us ended up split off earlier because we checked the calendar.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
And then somebody posted something in the fucking Telegram and everybody went off that way.
Oh no, I just copied it from the one from the last time. And yeah.
It's all right, it happens.
Good point. I'll change it then.
Hashtag
okay.
Agile.
Okay. So if no more questions, see you guys later.
Peace, homie.
All right.
See you.
Thanks for your time.
All right. Bye.
See you guys.